You never really know how strong you are until you're forced to build a life out of pieces someone else keeps breaking. When I met Rick, I didn't see the red flags. I saw a man who made me laugh, who listened when I spoke about my worries, who helped me believe that companionship could heal loneliness. I was a single mother, balancing work, bills, and a child with a disability. My days were endless loops of responsibility, my nights were quiet, sometimes too quiet. Rick filled that silence. At first, he was gentle. He'd show up with dinner, fix a leaky faucet, play board games with my son. I told myself he was different, not perfect, but kind, grounded. He made jokes about someday owning a house together, raising chickens in the backyard, growing old under one roof. I didn't know then that the someday he imagined meant me doing all the building while he just lived inside it. When the chance to buy a home came, I was terrified. The market was fierce, my credit still healing from years of scraping by, and I wasn't sure I could make it work. But I did the math, over and over. Between my salary and the small social security benefits my child received, it was possible. Barely, but possible. The day the bank called to say I'd been approved, I cried in my car. Rick celebrated like we'd won the lottery. He started talking about our living room, our deck, our future. I wanted to correct him, to remind him the bank had specifically told me not to add anyone to the deed unless they contributed financially. He hadn't. Not 1 cent. But I kept quiet. Love, I thought, was about trust. The truth hit later, like a slow leak. When we went to sign the paperwork, he noticed his name wasn't listed. His face darkened. "So it's just you?" he asked. "The bank said," I began. He cut me off. "Yeah, sure." Bank said. Whatever. From that moment, something shifted. He stopped saying, "we." Instead, he started saying, "mine." My kitchen. My TV. My couch. Each claim chipped away at the fragile peace I'd built. At first, the drinking seemed harmless, a beer after work, a night out with friends. Then came the excuses, just one more round, they needed a ride, you don't get how stressful my job is. I tried to be patient. Everyone has coping mechanisms, right? But soon, patience turned into panic. I'd wake at midnight to the sound of keys fumbling at the door, boots clomping down the hall, and the unmistakable smell of liquor. He'd trip into the bedroom, laughing, or worse, picking a fight about something trivial. One night, he shook me awake just to accuse me of moving his wallet. "Rick, it's 3 in the morning," I groaned. "So what? You think I don't notice how you hide things from me?" I turned my face to the wall and whispered, "I'm hiding peace, Rick. That's all." He didn't hear me. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. Exhaustion. By then, my health had started to fail. The doctor said hypothyroidism, a word that sounded harmless but felt like a curse. Every bone ached. My muscles burned from fatigue. I'd go to bed before sunset and still wake up tired. Sleep became my only sanctuary, the few hours where my mind could stop running. But Rick seemed determined to steal even that. He'd come home after the bars closed, blaring music, slamming doors, flipping lights on and off. He'd stumble into bed and mumble insults until he passed out. I tried earplugs. I tried locking the door. Nothing worked. He'd just pound harder. "Let me in, it's my house too," he'd shout. Those words again, my house. My therapist once said that leaving doesn't start with a suitcase. It starts with silence, the moment you stop defending someone's behavior in your own head. That silence came one dawn when I found my son sitting on the porch steps, backpack by his side. He looked up, eyes red from sleeplessness. "Can I stay at Grandma's tonight?" he asked. I nodded. He didn't need to explain why. As he walked down the street, the weight of it crushed me. My son felt safer anywhere else but home. That evening, when Rick staggered in, I didn't yell. I just watched. Watched the way he tossed his jacket, kicked off his shoes, opened another beer like it was oxygen. He didn't notice the tears on my face. He never noticed anything that wasn't about him. Later, lying awake, I realized something simple but sharp. This wasn't just about a relationship. It was about survival. He was drinking away my peace, my health, my child's safety. If I didn't take control, he'd drag me down with him. That's when the idea started forming. Not revenge, not yet. Just a quiet decision, he had to go. When I asked myself why I had stayed so long, the answers came in pieces that didn't add up to anything noble. There was fear, of being alone, of starting over, of being judged. There was exhaustion, a tiredness so deep it felt like grief. There were practical worries, money, my son, the look on my mother's face if I failed again. And there was that soft, corrosive hope that one day he'd change, that he'd become the man who once fixed the faucet and brought home dinner. None of those reasons mattered the night I pulled my curtains closed and decided I wouldn't beg anymore. Therapy had been something I started because the doctor suggested it, because the word hypothyroidism made my world smaller and I needed someone to hold it while I figured things out. At first it was practical, sleep hygiene, medication, small steps. But then the sessions turned into confessions, the kind you whisper into a chair that doesn't flinch. "You look tired," she said on the third visit. Her office always smelled faintly of lemon and something floral. "You look like someone carrying a roomful of furniture on their shoulders." I laughed once, a dry bark. "More like a house." She didn't smile. She drew her pen back and asked me to tell her about the house. So I did. I told her about the loan, about the bank's warning, about Rick's grin the day I got the keys. I told her about the nights he came home and turned sleep into a weapon. I told her how my son started sleeping on the living room couch to avoid the fights. When I finished, she said something I replayed for days. "You don't get to outsource your dignity," she said. "There's a difference between love that carries you and love that crushes you." The way she said it made me think of a scale. On one side, compromise, on the other, survival. For months, I'd been tipping toward compromise because making the other person comfortable was easier than hauling my life onto my own shoulders. But survival didn't ask for permission. I started noticing things I'd overlooked. The way Rick left beer in odd places, beside the baby gate where my son passed, on the kitchen counter beside an unfinished bowl of cereal. The way he refused to chip in for household repairs unless I nagged until my throat went sore. The way he would borrow money from his friends rather than get a second job. Small betrayals, threaded into every day until they became the fabric of our life. On a Thursday, after a particularly loud night, I went through his pockets. Not to be mean, but to understand. I found receipts from bar tabs, a crumpled surprise invitation to a friend's fishing trip, a lighter with a brand he favored. Nothing that mattered. Everything that mattered was the way he treated my home like an extension of his nightlife. I made a list, a private, furious tally. Each line was a thing he'd done that cost me sleep, security, or dignity. When the list was long enough, the anger stopped being a wild animal and started looking like a map. That Saturday morning, he stumbled in around noon, hair plastered to his head, eyes glassy. He laughed too loud at nothing and dropped his keys on the counter with a clatter. "You're late," I said, voice quieter than I felt. He snorted. "It's Saturday." "Yeah. It's Saturday and the house still needs to be a place where someone can sleep." My voice was steadier than I intended. "You can't keep living this way." He turned toward me like I'd said something funny. "Living this way? You mean the way where I have friends? Where I have a life?" "You have a life," I said slowly. "It's just not the one I signed up to share." He blinked, offended. You make it sound like I'm a parasite. You act like you own the roof because you pick up a beer can sometimes, I said, unable to stop. The words slid out like hot water. You haven't paid a penny for this house. For a beat the room held its breath. Then he laughed, a short, sharp sound. Fine. Don't add my name to the deed. See if I care. It was the most honest thing he'd said in months, and the most dangerous. He didn't care. That indifference is what had been killing me slowly, and indifference is shrapnel. Revenge, I told myself, is sloppy when it's born of fury. If I was going to end this, I wanted it to be clean, thoughtful, and unarguably true. I didn't want to throw gasoline on a pile and run. I wanted something that proved a point so plainly that even his buddies would nod and say, yeah, that makes sense. I laid out the rules for myself quietly, like setting the boundaries of a room. No violence. I wouldn't stoop to breaking windows or hurting anyone. That would make me him. No legal theatrics. I'd done everything by the book with the mortgage. I didn't need lawyers, I needed clarity. Make it public. Shame works only when the audience is the right one. His crowd, the bar, the regulars, the guys who'd seen him at his worst, would be the jury. Make it symbolic. The message had to be simple enough to read at a glance. The idea arrived like a ridiculous present, a giant teddy bear. I knew there was one sitting in our attic. My son had won it at a fair 2 summers back and we'd never found a place for it. It was comically big, pristine white, and absurd. If I dressed it in Rick's uniform, if I stuffed it with his clothes, and if I displayed it on the curb surrounded by his junk, the image would be unmistakable. This is not your home, this is what you've become. I pictured the scene, neighbors peeking from curtains, bar patrons walking by and laughing, Rick's face when he realized people knew exactly what he was, a caricature. The thought of it made a strange, warm thrill run through me. Not cruelty. Clarity. I didn't want to do this alone. My son had watched more than any child should. He was older now, tall for his age, slouching with the tiredness of someone who'd learned to take care of himself early. The idea of involving him made my stomach tighten and my heart warm at once. Do you want to help me with a stupid, brilliant plan? I asked him one evening after dinner, when Rick was at the bar and the house hummed with the after silence. He looked up from his phone. What kind of stupid? He asked. The kind that gets the point across. He was quiet for a beat, then he grinned. As long as it's not illegal. It's not. It's theatrical. It's poetic. He shrugged and walked over to the attic with me. Up there, among boxes of school projects and holiday decorations, the teddy bear looked smaller than I remembered. We dragged it down the steps together, laughing at the absurdity. For the first time in months, my son and I were on the same side and it felt like armor. Execution is mostly logistics. I learned that in my job where small details meant the difference between success and disaster. So we made a checklist: shirt, work pants, ball cap, boots, marker, garbage bags, empty beer boxes, tape, poster board for the sign. I found a shirt with his name stitched across the pocket, an old work uniform he left in the laundry months ago. The pants still had the faint smell of the workshop. We stuffed the bear's torso with newspaper first to give it shape, then rolled his shirts, socks, and jeans into the limbs until the bear looked like a human-shaped mound. My son drew a crooked mustache on the bear with a marker, and we put his stubbly cap on the head. Everything felt slightly ridiculous and therefore perfect. The act of making it, the folding, the stuffing, the snorting laughter that escaped both of us, was a release. It was ritual. When it came to the sign, my son wrote the words in block letters while I stood back. We'll work for beer. The letters were not just letters. They were a sentence that folded his life into one humiliating truth. We wrapped his clothes in garbage bags, tied them, and stacked empty beer boxes around the bear. The tableau was absurd, theatrical, and unmistakable. We didn't set the scene without a rehearsal. My son and I carried the cardboard queue, the bear and its luggage, to the curb at dusk and placed it there like an installation. From the window we watched the street. Two neighbors walked past, heads turning, then one of them laughed and said, "Looks like someone's moved on." We brought everything back inside and sat on the porch steps in the twilight, both of us strangely solemn. My son ate a bowl of cereal like nothing dramatic had happened and then said, quietly, "This will be good, right?" I wanted to promise forever and safety. Instead, I squeezed his hand and said, "This will be what we need." The night before we executed the plan, I hardly slept. My thoughts were a messy web of worry and relief. Was I petty? Maybe. Was I brave? Maybe. Was I tired of living small and letting someone else make noise in my sanctuary? Absolutely. Timing mattered. I wanted him to come home at a moment when witnesses, the barflies, the neighbors, the delivery guy, were likely to be around. Saturday afternoon was too easy, people were out and the bar was open. So we picked that midday slot. He'd be drunk from last night, proud in that sloppy way, and the street would be populated enough to witness him. We rehearsed the logistics one more time. My son would be at school until lunch. I would be at work by 9, the bear would go out at 11. My sister agreed to take a call from me and keep her porch light on just in case. Small redundancies were comfort. When I left for work that morning, the bear sat on the curb, a ridiculous sentinel. I drove away with a small, secret grin. Work that day felt like a blur. My heart beat like an overworked metronome in my chest. I tried to focus on spreadsheets, on emails, on normality. My co-workers asked why I seemed particularly buoyant and I lied, something about a good night's sleep. At noon my phone buzzed. My sister sent a photo. The bear was in place, surrounded by the beer boxes, the sign leaning forward as if it were telling the truth. I felt lighter than I had in years. A profound, quiet lightness that was not giddy triumph but relief, the kind you get when you stop carrying something you were never meant to shoulder. Then the call came from my son, "He's heading home." My breath went thin. The next hour moved in slow, bright frames. By the time Rick's truck rumbled onto the street, the sun had begun to tilt westward. From my living room window, I watched a patch of late-day light crawl across the pavement until it found him. He stumbled out of the driver's seat with the swagger of a man who believed the world still applauded him. Then he saw it. For a long second he didn't move. The white bear sat there in his work shirt and cap, the sign hanging from its fuzzy neck. The garbage bags at its feet looked like luggage. Empty 12-packs framed the scene like a stage set. I could almost hear the click of his thoughts as realization dawned. The street went quiet except for the soft clink of a beer can rolling in the gutter. Two men from the bar across the road paused, elbowed each other, and burst into laughter. "Hey Rick," one shouted, "they finally promoted you, front yard decoration of the month." Rick's face flushed the color of cheap wine. He bent, grabbed one of the garbage bags, ripped it open, and found it stuffed with his own shirts. The laughter grew. Someone whistled. A woman walking her dog muttered, "Good for her," under her breath. From behind the curtain, I watched years of humiliation collapse into one exquisite instant. Every insult, every slammed door, every night he'd robbed me of sleep folded itself neatly into that tableau of karma. He kicked at the sign, tore it in half, and muttered something I couldn't catch. Then he looked toward the house. For a moment our eyes met through the glass. There was no rage left in me, no fear. Just a calm steadiness that said, "It's done." He hesitated, maybe expecting me to come out, to fight, to beg, to cry. I didn't. I simply closed the curtain. When I opened the blinds again, He was loading the last of his luggage into the truck. His movements were jerky, desperate, the way a man moves when dignity has already left the room. The bear slumped sideways, its hat falling into the gutter. He started the engine, revved it twice, and roared off. The truck fishtailed slightly as it disappeared down the block. The street returned to normal. Children's voices floated from somewhere distant, a lawn-mower hummed. The world, unconcerned, carried on. Inside my chest, something unclenched. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding my breath, months, maybe years. That evening the neighbors pretended not to gossip, but I could feel it in the air, curiosity, admiration, a pinch of scandal. I didn't mind. Let them talk. Every whispered version of the story was a small piece of truth finally being aired out. When my son came home, he dropped his backpack by the door and asked, "Did he see it?" "Oh, he saw it," I said. He grinned, wide and bright, and for the first time in months his shoulders weren't hunched. We sat on the porch steps with bowls of ice cream, the twilight thick around us. Fireflies blinked over the grass. The quiet wasn't empty anymore, it was earned. "Do you think he'll come back?" my son asked. "No," I said, spoon pausing midair. "Men like that don't come back when the mirror's too clear." He nodded slowly, satisfied with the answer. The next day I went to work as if nothing monumental had happened, but the news traveled faster than rumor usually does. A coworker leaned over the partition. "Hey," she whispered, "is it true you evicted your ex with a teddy bear?" I laughed. "Something like that." The laughter that followed wasn't mocking, it was admiration disguised as disbelief. By lunch, people were buying me coffee just to hear the story firsthand. For once, I wasn't the woman surviving a bad relationship, I was the woman who'd ended it with style. That evening my therapist called during our usual slot. "So," she said, voice already smiling, "did the bear work?" I told her everything, the laughter, the humiliation, the silence afterward. She laughed so hard she had to set down her tea. "There are 50 ways to leave your lover," she gasped between chuckles, "but you just invented 51. Humor aside, the days that followed were strange. Freedom is heavy when you first lift it. I'd wake at midnight expecting the crash of the door, the stench of whiskey, the argument forming in my throat. Instead, there was nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. I began sleeping through the night. My body, long deprived of rest, started remembering what peace felt like. The exhaustion that had wrapped itself around me loosened. I noticed sunlight again, the way it pooled on the kitchen floor, the way it touched the curtains. Cleaning the house became a ritual of reclaiming. Each swept corner, each aired-out room felt like exorcism. I repainted the bedroom walls a pale sage green. I replaced the stereo speakers he'd used to blare his drunken anthems with a small, quiet radio. Every change whispered the same thing, mine. A week later, one of his drinking buddies showed up on the sidewalk while I was watering the plants. He hovered awkwardly before speaking. "Hey, sorry about Rick," he said. "That was rough." "Rough?" I repeated. He rubbed his neck. "Yeah, but, honestly, everyone at the bar says you did what he deserved." He won't shut up about the bear thing. He's trying to laugh it off, but, the man grinned. "He's not laughing." I thanked him, and he walked away shaking his head in amused disbelief. Word had spread exactly as I'd hoped, not as bitterness, but as parable. The man who took advantage of kindness got turned into a cautionary tale, and I didn't have to shout to make it happen. In the following weeks I learned that revenge doesn't have to rot you from the inside if it's shaped from honesty instead of hatred. Mine had been theatrical, yes, but it had also been truthful. It forced the world to see what I'd endured without me having to explain it again and again. I picked up new habits, evening walks with my son, Sunday breakfasts on the porch, therapy sessions that no longer revolved around damage control but around future plans. I started planting herbs by the kitchen window. Simple things. Real things. Sometimes, when the breeze carried faint laughter from the bar down the road, I'd smile, not with anger, but with the soft amusement of someone who has finally stepped out of the storm. One quiet night, I wrote a letter I never mailed. It started with, "Dear Rick," and ended with, "Thank you." In between, I poured everything I'd learned. Thank you for teaching me what exhaustion costs. Thank you for reminding me that peace is a house you have to defend. Thank you for leaving so loudly that I finally heard myself think again. When I finished, I folded it and placed it inside the drawer of my bedside table. Not for him, he didn't deserve closure, but for me. Proof that the story had an ending, and that it belonged entirely to me. Months later, when people asked if I was seeing anyone new, I smiled and said, "I'm seeing quiet mornings and coffee that stays warm." It wasn't loneliness. It was healing shaped like solitude. My son flourished. His grades climbed, his laughter returned, and one day he came home from school with a drawing for an art project. It was a cartoon version of the bear, sitting on the curb with sunglasses and a caption, "Lesson learned." I hung it on the fridge like a trophy. Revenge, I learned, isn't about destroying someone else, it's about restoring the part of yourself they tried to erase. My act wasn't born of hate, it was born of exhaustion turned into art. And maybe that's why it worked so well. It told the truth without me having to raise my voice. The house stands quieter now. The air smells like fresh paint and basil. At night, when I turn off the lights, I can hear the soft creak of the floorboards settling, not under tension, but under peace. I built this life. Brick by brick, boundary by boundary. And the next time someone tries to tell me what's theirs, I'll smile and remember the teddy bear on the curb, the laughter in the street, and the sweet sound of a truck driving away for the last time. Justice doesn't always come from a courtroom or a fight. Sometimes it comes from creativity, from standing so firmly in your truth that mockery turns into applause. I didn't just move my ex out of the house, I moved out the fear, the guilt, and the noise that came with him. If this story made you smile or reminded you that karma has a sense of humor, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. Tell me in the comments, what's the smartest revenge you've ever seen? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories where justice is served, not with fury, but with flair.